Last week, our first lesson from the theme Out of the Grave, we discussed Jesus' resurrection. Let's see what this week holds. Our account today is titled The Emmaus Disciples. Just like we will learn in our story, Jesus taught that all the scriptures point to him. This is something that Christian workers teach to people groups all over the world. Peter Station wants the nomadic people of East Asia to know that we can learn about Jesus in the Bible. The area he lives in can be very dangerous for people who believe in Jesus, so he is very careful about how and when he shares. In fact, Peter Station isn't even his real name. We often use pretend names to help keep Peter and missionaries like him safe.
Hi there, I'm Pastor Brian, and it's time for Questions from Kids. Brandon from Jacksonville, Florida asks,
Do I really have to read all of the Bible? It's so long, and sometimes it seems confusing.
You know, Brandon, that's a great question, and I want to camp out on one word of that. Have. Do I have to do this? And in a way, I'd say yes, and in a way, I'd say no. So let me just kind of explain that for a minute. First of all, do you have to do it in order to please God? No, that's not the way the gospel works. The gospel works about what Jesus has done, and we need to find forgiveness and identity and purpose in that. But then in another sense, I say, well, because of God's goodness to us, we should want to spend time getting to know him better. And we do that primarily through reading his word and praying and worshiping. So reading the Bible is really important. So in another sense, I would say, yeah, you kind of do have to. You should want to. And that's the key. There needs to be heart behind it. I think if your heart's not behind it, it's going to be hard to do, and it will feel like a chore. It'll feel like a labor, and you don't want to do it and want to quit. So the first thing I would say is pray that God moves your heart in such a way that you're reminded of God's goodness and you want to spend time reading the Bible to get to know him. So now let me get to the heart of your question beyond that. The whole Bible. Yes, it's a long book. There's a lot of stuff in it. But I would encourage you to do this. It's all written to us as one big story of God's plan to save people through Jesus, and it all has value. So you want to read all of it. Don't skip parts. That's a bad habit to develop of picking and choosing what you want to focus on in the Bible. So I would encourage you, read it all. Now here's the thing. Do that at a pace that makes sense for you. If you read about 15, 20 minutes a day, you could read the entire Bible in a year. And a lot of people try to do that. They try to read through the Bible every year. That's a great thing to do, but maybe you read slower, or maybe it's hard for you to find that time every day. Don't feel stressed if you can't read it all in a year. Maybe read it all in 2 years, or whatever time makes sense for you. The key is not how long it takes you to do. The key is that you're spending time in the Word regularly as you're getting to know God better. So find that habit that works for you. Pray that God moves your heart, that you enjoy that time, and learn as much as you can. And again, that practice of reading it day by day, you'll find yourself loving God more, understanding more of this, and enjoying your time in the Word each and every day. So here's a question back for you. How can you develop the habit of reading God's Word each day?
Hi friends, welcome back to my farm. You arrived just in time. I was about to leave to head into town to get some supplies. Living on the farm is nice, but sometimes I do miss the convenience of being only 5 or 10 minutes from the grocery store. It takes me nearly 45 minutes on the back country roads to get to the nearest town. Even so, I like being a farmer. And if I lived in the city, I wouldn't have enough space to plant my crops. So even with some mild inconveniences, I'm still thankful to live where I live and work, doing the work I do. Plus, the drive into town gives me a chance to let my mind wander and think about what I'm learning in the Bible. You know, that actually reminds me of a story. 2 disciples were journeying from Jerusalem to a city called Emmaus. In a car with modern roads, that trip wouldn't take too long, but those 2 were on foot. Thankfully, they had a wonderful conversation with Jesus as they walked. Let's learn about what they talked about.
I love to walk, and this morning I'm going to share an account of the Emmaus disciples from Luke 24 about a walk they took before I go on my walk. On that day, Jesus had rose from the dead. 2 of Jesus' disciples were walking to a village called Emmaus. The 2 disciples were talking about everything that had just happened. As they talked, Jesus came and began to walk with them. But the disciples, they did not recognize him. Jesus asked the disciples, "What are you talking about?" The disciples stopped walking. They looked sad. One of the disciples, Cleopas, answered, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who has not heard what happened?" "What happened?" Jesus asked. So they told him. Jesus of Nazareth was a prophet. He was powerful when he acted and spoke before God and all the people. The religious leaders handed Jesus over to be sentenced to death, and they nailed him to a cross. We had hoped he was the one who would set Israel free. Besides, it is the 3rd day since this thing happened. Early this morning, some women had gone to the tomb and did not find Jesus' body there. They saw angels who said that Jesus is alive. Some of our friends went to the tomb, and they saw the tomb empty as well. Jesus said, "You are foolish to not believe what the prophet said. Isn't this what had happened to the Messiah?" Then, beginning with Moses and the prophets, Jesus explained to them what all the scriptures said about him. Jesus and the 2 disciples arrived at Emmaus, and they asked Jesus to stay with them. So Jesus joined them at the dinner table. He took the bread, thanked God for it, and broke it into pieces. Then he gave the pieces to the disciples. Right away, the disciples recognized Jesus. But Jesus immediately disappeared from their sight. The 2 disciples had thought about their walk to Emmaus. They said, "When Jesus talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures, did not our hearts burn with excitement?" The disciples immediately left Emmaus and went back to Jerusalem. They found Jesus' 11 disciples and others who gathered with them. They told them what had happened. They said, "Simon saw Jesus too. Jesus is alive." The whole Bible is about Jesus. When Adam and Eve sinned, God began working out his plan to send Jesus to rescue people from sin. All of the Old Testament points towards Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. The time when Jesus would bring God's promised salvation for sinners.